So, hello class. How's everybody today? Hello. The weather is turned around, so that's a positive thing. We might have to do a field trip again today. Have a beer or seven. So, so thank you for arriving mostly on time. It's great to have you out here today. I'm really excited because obviously we've been talking about the class is obviously business communications for entrepreneurs and startups. So a lot of what we've been learning is how to, prepare and about the communications across teams. And like yesterday, our exercises was, to sit down and actually do a spoken communication to teammates, which Sarah will have to get you in on today, but we'll do it after the guest speaker. So we've been putting a lot of that into practice and learning a lot about how to present yourself and how to prepare for it, and some of the terminologies and keywords, and what was the big thing, the acronym that we need to make sure we include? Call to action. The CTA, right? So make sure you have a call to action when you're speaking. It's amazing. I love the fact that the school allows us to bring in some guest speakers, and so today I'm very excited to have my friend Philipp come in. I'll let him introduce himself for the most part, but I met Philipp a few years ago now, I guess already.
Go way back.
Yeah. So at one point I was working for a co-working space in South Burnaby, and Philipp actually came out as one of the guest speakers for a panel. And then him and I just started talking, and then ever since then we just kind of on a regular basis get together just to catch up and stuff. And I've been following their journey at his company for a while, and I thought it was a perfect representation. So what he's going to be speaking to today is essentially how communications looks across teams. So of course, a lot of what I've been teaching you is about, especially the early stages, startup life, what communications looks like at the beginning and as you're scaling. And I felt like Philipp could kind of perfectly speak to that because, thinking back to 6.5 years ago when he started the company and growing it, and he's been in that spot and all the way through the journey of growth of where they are now, which he'll tell you more about that at the stage they're at. But I just thought it was an interesting view that we can learn from him of what communications look like for him on both internal and external stakeholders. So remember, that's one of the first things that we learned is how to identify those, how you speak to them. So, have Philipp come in and speak to some of that and what he's seen in his time with Rentmoola and even in other experiences if he has any war stories, as it were. So really excited to bring in Philipp, and so thank you very much. And I won't delay anymore. I'll let Philipp do the talking. So thanks, Philipp.
Well, thanks a lot. So yeah, I'll share the Rentmoola story with you guys, and then I'll talk about communications. I come from a marketing background, and then hopefully you guys have a whole bunch of questions and I can answer those for you. So as Paul mentioned, 6.5 years ago, my brother and I founded Rentmoola. We are a online payments company focused on eliminating the rent check. So if you guys are living in North America or overseas, the pain point of paying rent is everywhere. So people are still writing they're still writing rent checks. It's a pain point. So we founded Rentmoola to eliminate the pain point, not just for the property manager, but also for the tenant. We're focused on the medium to enterprise level property managers, so not the individual landlord, but 1,000 all the way to 40,000 units. So much more of a larger scale operation where collecting checks and other forms of payment like cash is a serious pain point for both sides. So we launched. We spent a year building it. We launched 5.5 years ago, but like Paul mentioned, 6.5 years ago was kind of when we started building it. And we launched here in Vancouver. We're across North America now, and we provide people the ability to pay with credit card, their checking account, cash. We've added other payment methods recently. Student housing is a big market for us. Foreign students is a big market for us because they have some of the greatest pain points. And we now have a team of just under 30 people, and in that time we've raised just under $17 million. And we are a bit of a unique model, or not unique, but not traditional, because We have several audiences. For somebody to pay their rent with Rentmoola, the property manager needs to be onboarded first. So we have a B2B communication play, and we have a B2C communication play, because then we work with the property manager to market to their tenants. And we position the company as a B2C fintech lifestyle brand, so a brand that people actually want to be associated with. Paying your rent isn't exactly that exciting, but we've done things along the way to make it exciting and to tell more of an exciting brand story, which our main competitors are in the US, and they've really taken a B2B approach from a branding and communication standpoint. That's really allowed us to stand out. In terms of how we make money, because I know revenue continues to be more and more important, we charge a small service fee to the tenant to pay with certain payment methods like a credit card, and then we've actually recently started charging also more like a SaaS business model for the property managers as well to use our tool. We're in over 400 cities across North America, and continue to get some large clients that you would probably recognize, not just in Vancouver but nationally. So that's kind of in a nutshell. Our four kind of core, teams is development. We're a technology company, so development. Number two would be customer success slash customer support. So really the teams that help not just the property manager but the tenants if they need anything. Finance is a big one. We are a fintech company, so we deal with lots of money. And thirdly is sales. So we have a lot of, we do have some inbound sales, but it's a lot of outbound sales on the enterprise side. So from a communication standpoint, actually before I keep going, any kind of questions right off the bat?
No, I think we're good, yeah.
Okay. So from a communication standpoint, do you want me to cover off internal and external?
Yeah, please, yeah.
Okay.
So let's start with internal if you can.
Sure.
So, how did that look at the beginning?
I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah.
Have you started with this business idea, or you changed it for this one after trying to launch in the market? It was the first business idea or not?
So since we launched it, we haven't really had to pivot. We've entered actually into another emerging market vertical. So credit card payments is considered an emerging market vertical for rent. So we have direct relationships with Visa and MasterCard because they really like having that kind of volume on their network. And another, industry that is considered an emerging market vertical is utility payments, so your electricity bill. So that's another area we've gone into, but we haven't really had to pivot at all since we launched. We've just added more to our product, not just from a feature standpoint, but also from a payment method standpoint. Yeah, go ahead.
How was your approach to Visa and MasterCard?
When you say
easy to approach them?
Well, when we first started, we had to prove ourselves, right? So at the beginning, we didn't. We had a really supportive payment processing partner, but as our volume started to build and they started to recognize the opportunity, we got to go to them directly. So at the beginning, they were looking at us, but until we had proved ourselves, they didn't really talk to us directly until we had reached a certain level of volume. Yeah. That's so from an internal communication standpoint. So obviously, we're constantly evolving the product, right? So it's really important that we are communicating internally what all the new features are, right? So if we're doing monthly release cycles, we need to be letting our team know what those are and what the features are, especially if they're on the phone with a customer, they need to know what's going on, right? So there's a whole communication plan internally to help kind of educate the team on the product and how it's evolving. Also from an internal communication standpoint, it's also making sure that the team understands the strategy, not just for the year, but the overall what the goal is, right? And it's changed a little bit over time. At the beginning, our focus was users, then it became more focused on revenue, right? So in communicating that internally, we do that through monthly lunch and learns. We We use Slack, we use different tools. If it's important enough, we'll even print it and put it on the wall. If it's, for example, our vision and mission statement, that is something that doesn't really change, so that's up on the wall. Our values are up on the wall. So certain things we'll even print, although we aim to be paperless in everything that we do. So lots of communication ongoing, because what you don't want is the team feeling like they're being left out, and then finding out, let's say, from a user or from a property manager, or you have this new feature, what is it? Right? They need to be empowered and educated. So not only are they excited, but they're confident in what they're, and not just what they're selling, but what they're talking about. Right? If they're confident, they're going to feel that much better. You're going to decrease frustration and all that. So that's kind of an internal, kind of like summary.
How many employees your business has?
So we have now we're like at like 27. Yeah.
But what's important about that is that they're not just here in Vancouver, right?
So at first we used to have we had some team members in Toronto as well. That has its own challenges. We ended up actually bringing everyone into Vancouver for multiple reasons, and actually one of them was communication and just making them feel. It was just a bit challenging from a culture standpoint, making them feel part of the culture, because the team was like, we had like a team of 2 or 3 in Toronto, it's really small. So again, if you're operating at that kind of size, it can become challenging, right? So we actually brought everyone in, which actually did make the communication easier, because they didn't feel left out, or they weren't getting it, let's say, by Skype. They were getting it firsthand.
But your team at the beginning?
So when we first started, we bootstrapped it, and we had no office for the first year, and we worked out of Starbucks, and we didn't actually get our first office space almost until a year after we launched. So at the beginning, it was just my brother and I we hired our first person a few months after. We started building the team after that, but for the first little while, it was bootstrapped, and everyone, like I was doing customer service on weekends.
Yeah, and the turnover, how it works for this
How's your turnover?
Like in terms of team?
Yeah.
That's a good question. Well, so our turnover, we went through, if you want to share, I mean, like a war story. Sometimes a company will reach a point in its existence where the team it has is not the team that's going to take it to the next level. So at the beginning of last year, we actually ended up rebuilding our entire management team, and that actually ended up causing us to have like a 90% turnover. Now that we didn't have 90, like it was relatively low, but when that happened, we pretty much replaced everyone, and that had to happen. And lots of companies will do that as they are evolving and growing, because they'll reach a point where they need to have more experience, or the culture needs to slightly shift. And so yeah, our turnover was relatively low, but at one point it spiked when we replaced the entire team.
A great example of a place you guys just visited that sort of thing might not be visible, but you guys just recently visited Hootsuite for an event, right? That recently happened at Hootsuite about 2 or 3 years ago, where they had a huge amount of employees, but they went through a huge corporate. They went from the change of like being very laid back, kind of startup hipster style, to more of a corporate feel, and a lot of people didn't feel that, and they had a mass exodus, right? It's just part of the culture change.
And probably if they didn't have that, they may not be around, right? So
yeah.
Regardless of the size of companies, don't sometimes. I'm not saying it has to happen, but it happens regularly, and usually it's a good thing, because it's taking the company to that next level.
May I ask one more?
Yeah.
Why the culture change?
I think we went from more of a laid back, everyone's buddies, friends, to a more, I guess, mature culture. Again, it's still like a fun place to work, but we had to take things. We really then after that became focused on revenue. We just brought in more experienced team members, especially on the management side. To that point, anybody who had worked at Rentmoola had done a great job, but it's just the evolution of startups. They go through phases.
It's just sometimes part of scaling, right? As you're scaling, we've talked in our classes about, I've mentioned before about having to systemize things and insert processes, and in startup life, everything's sort of like everybody's the janitor, everybody's the salesperson, everybody's everything. And then you get to a certain point where it's like, okay, sort of like what we were talking about before yesterday, Baymar, you're the sales director, you are in charge of this and this and this, and some people just can't take that kind of responsibility, and it's just not for them, and you have to have this culture shift in order to scale to the next level. So it's a very natural process. It
Agreed,
happens a lot.
Yeah. Any other questions for now?
Okay.
From a external communication standpoint, we, like I mentioned, position ourselves as a B2C lifestyle fintech brand. What does that mean? We have a Moola Perks program, which is kind of like our own rewards program, which allows us to tell different stories about it makes our brand story more engaging, right? And we are a first of the month business, so we wanted people to be able to think of our brand besides each first of the month when they're paying their rent. So we spent a lot of time and money building up our social channels, and that also was reflected in our PR strategy. So we were fortunate enough to get quite a bit of PR, and PR is really important in both internal and external communications, right? Also, because of the way we raise money, we have a pretty large investor base. So PR for us is really important from an internal standpoint for making our team members feel really good about what they're doing and what we stand for. Number two, investor relations, really good for investor relations. People get excited about PR. And then in general, it just makes our brand just look even better in general for the consumer when they see that we're in the news and we're having positive stories written about us. So I led that effort from the beginning, and we continue to have great PR. Some of it we don't even ask for. That's probably the best PR, is when you just get your Google alert and it says they did a story on you and they didn't even reach out to you. It's happened a few times. Those are the best because they're surprises. But overall, that's another key strategy is PR, right? So you got to let people know, and obviously you don't have the budgets to do large awareness campaigns most likely. So PR can really do that. Obviously you have to have a compelling story, and ideally it's a story that resonates. For us, everybody has or is paying rent, and it's a very simple pain point that we're solving. So telling that story was really easy, and a lot of people could relate. Might be more challenging if it's like a B2B play. It's very niche. That might be tougher. But then again, in that case, you may be targeting an audience that's smaller, and that's all the PR that you really need. So it really depends on what industry you're in.
Do you have any examples of, sorry, I'm going to throw a curveball at you potentially.
Yeah.
Do you have any examples of any times where something maybe not so positive happened and you had to react to that in a communications way? I know of one example that I saw along the way for Rentmoola.
Yeah. Hey, we do have one. The March 22nd.
Yeah.
So we had sometimes the way you get better is by going through what I will call a crisis. I will call that one a crisis. So last March 22nd, everyone remembers that date. The night before we did a hotfix and we pushed out some code. No big deal, we thought. But that code actually triggered all of our reoccurring payments to run 7 days early. Now that's a big deal because it's rent, right? It's not like $50, right? It's usually our average is like $1,000. So that event caused us to introduce new processes for that not to happen again, and we dealt with that actually really well. We came out of it stronger, and from a communication standpoint, we created an entire, I guess you could say, crisis communication plan to deal with that. I actually ended up doing interviews, even with national media about it. And the PR, in the end, we got 1 or 2 stories published, but the good news is that we had lots of positive PR later that kind of pushed that down in the Google results, and now I don't think, maybe it's on page 2, who knows, right? Long term, it didn't impact us at all, and short term, it just made us introduce better processes and made us a better company. At the time, it didn't feel like that. Sorry?
So learn fast.
Exactly, yeah. So at the time, it didn't feel like it was gonna be a good experience, but because it was extremely stressful. But in the end, we came out stronger and better for it. So, and now we even talk to it in certain pitches that we do, where they're like, "Oh, how would you deal with something?" Well, actually, this is how we have dealt with it, and then they're like, "Oh, wow." Because lots of companies will say they have a plan, but they've never actually enacted it. We actually enacted one on the flies, but we created it so that we can see if we've actually used it, which actually gives them confidence. So we actually won business, and we never lost any business. Yeah. But it took a lot of work to rebuild some trust with some people.
Cool.
And actually, that's another thing, right? If you have a strong brand, you're able to rebuild, because you can lose trust like that, right? So we were able, with our strong brand presence, our strong brand, I guess, equity, to kind of help. We were able to rebuild that trust faster. Yeah. What else did you want me to cover off?
So when did you start raising money in the company? Because you mentioned that you bootstrapped it. Do you remember whenabouts you started?
Well, we raised money almost from the beginning, just from friends and family, because my brother and I aren't developers, so we outsourced the development locally. So we started raising money early on, but we didn't get into a more formal fundraising round until probably like a year after launch. So we started to get more serious and started raising more actual serious capital in a much more, I guess, strategic way. Yeah.
So can you recall maybe some of the communications efforts you took at that time? Like, how did you connect with potential investors, and did you do any pitching? Is there anything that you discovered along the way in that time?
Yeah, so from an IR perspective, for us, most of our investors, those are direct conversations we're having, right? And obviously having a really strong investor deck is important. Having traction and everything else is vital, but it's what you do after to keep them engaged. Again, we have no VC funding. We have investors that have actually reinvested with us. So for us, it's keeping them updated. So sending them quarterly investor updates, really acting like a public company, but we're not public. And public companies have to update their investors on a regular basis. So we actually started doing that early on, even when we didn't need to. We actually used to do it monthly, but then it can become quite time intensive, so we switched to quarterly. And they really appreciate being in the know, right? Because you can't assume that everybody is living and breathing your company like you are, because they have other things that they're doing. So giving them all those PR updates, product updates on a quarterly basis can really go a long way, especially when they click forward and they send it on to somebody and they may be interested in investing. Yeah.
What are the main focuses of your pitch depending on the external stakeholder you're going to pitch to? For example, you have to pitch to Visa and MasterCard to start working with you, right?
Yeah.
And also to the building managers.
Yeah.
And to all these people, for example, in Visa, you focus mainly on the quantity of customers, or they are interested in knowing the revenue, or how do you change your pitch to
the audience?
Yeah, to the audience.
That's a great question. So the IR, the investor audience, is looking for they're looking for, I guess you could say, more proprietary information like revenue, right? Like we would never say what our revenue is to a property manager, right? Because we usually we sign NDAs, right? And there's information we're going to share with an investor that we wouldn't share publicly, right? So you're sharing more sensitive information, and you're sharing the future, right? You're sharing what you're planning on, what your projections are, right? So you're looking towards the future as well. So present and future. For the property manager, they don't really care about the future. They care about now and how you're going to solve their pain point. So when we're selling to them, we're learning what they need, and then we're educating them and empowering them with our tools and how we can help them. So for the investor, You're educating them about the opportunity and the future. For the property manager, you're educating them about right now and how we solve their pain point. And same for the tenant, right? The tenant doesn't care how long money takes to arrive in their bank account. They just care that it's going to work and that they can pay with different payment methods. The investor, again, won't care how long money takes to arrive for the property manager. They care what the results have been to date and how they're going to make money at the end, right? For the property manager, they care how they're going to save money. Right? So it's very different audiences and different KPIs, key performance indicators, that you're kind of highlighting for each audience. And really, in the end, you always have to think about like what's the pain point that you're kind of addressing, right? For the investor, they may not have a pain point per se, but their pain point may be that they want to make money, right? So how are you going to address their desire to make money? And then property manager, how are you going to address their desire to save time? And then the tenant, how are you going to address their desire to never have to write a rent check? Right? So again, you're kind of looking at those key pain points and those needs and addressing those first. They may ask about things, but that's not what you're going to go out with.
So don't forget, guys, the homework for tomorrow, Friday, is going to be to turn in your 5 lessons that you learned that were important to you from Philipp's talk today. So just do remember that as we're doing this.
I've heard you're a really hard marker too, right? Just kidding.
Totally, yeah. It's a check mark. It's really rough. Sometimes my wrist hurts, so it's...
Yeah, it's like, okay, with those kind of external stakeholders, you focus mainly on problem and solution. And what is the difference between small external stakeholders and big external stakeholders like Visa or MasterCard that have like a huge... It's like that's a good question. So the Visa and MasterCard audience, that's a partnership, right? So you want them, but they also want you, right? So I mean, you can look at all these as partnerships, but that's a true strategic partnership, right? So in that case, you would probably take a bit of elements from the investor deck, right? Because they also want to see the future, right? And you would also take elements from the property manager deck or sales deck, because they care about both, right? And in the end, as you go into these meetings and you do these pitches, you're gonna like we've had like dozens and dozens of versions of our investor deck, right? Like it's never gonna be perfect. You're gonna make it better based on feedback, right? So you may keep getting certain questions, so then you're gonna address that right in the deck. But you want to put yourself in their shoes. But yeah, for somebody like Visa and MasterCard, you are going to be combining probably sets of information because they are. It's a strategic partnership. It's a good question, but it's not something there's like a magic formula. You have to address the audience and the questions you're getting and revise. You're not going to come out with the perfect deck. You can get close, but...
So I was going to ask, in the early days for all of us, for early days in entrepreneurship, recently what we were talking about a little bit about the no. So,
the no?
The no. Like, how do you, how do you deal with that adversity? I'm assuming at the beginning of Rentmoola's life, there was a lot of no's. I would hope they're significantly reduced now.
There's some, yeah. So
how did you deal with that, and what was the communications efforts around that? And is there any specific
I find
tools
no sometimes methods? Almost as motivational as yeses, because then you like to prove the person wrong. So in the early days we had property managers that would say no to us. They didn't really have a good reason, but yeah, they would say no to us, and eventually they would become clients down the road, right? Investors, that's different. You're always going to get no's from investors, but obviously people say yes as well, right? So it's all about
if you talk to enough people, you're getting enough yeses, so the no's won't matter. The thing is that the no's will usually ask questions that the yeses may not have asked, and will actually it'll make you better, right? It'll make your pitch, your deck better, and that'll most likely result in you getting even more yeses, right? So it's good to be rejected because then you can only get better, right? As long as you can take the feedback, right? It's not personal, and as long as you can take the feedback, obviously some of the feedback may really not be worthwhile, but they may say something like, I never thought of that, and then you can address it for future presentations. And you may not get that and no for that reason ever again. So rejection is good. It'll only make you better. Same with competition, right? If there wasn't competition, it's not going to keep you on your toes and make you better. We rebuilt our platform 3 times over. It's constantly like, you're constantly looking and seeing how you can make it better. But competition and no's make you do it in an even more proactive manner.
So it sounds to me like you're very pragmatic about no's and feedback and all that kind of stuff now. I mean, you're 6.5 years in.
Yeah.
And so you're able to deal with that in a much different way. But maybe there's not a correct answer to this, but is there a certain way you dealt with that adversity at the beginning? How did you deal with it? Like, everybody deals with that rejection differently. So how did that look for you at the beginning, and how did you? Were you from the very beginning like, no's are okay and feedback is good, or were there moments where like, damn, this is rough. What are we doing here, Patrick? Like,
yeah, I mean, look, yeah, it's a great question. It depends a lot on your personal attitude, right? Like, as an entrepreneur, you can't get defeated by somebody saying no to you. You have to expect no's, right? That's part of being an entrepreneur. If everybody said yes, then there would be way more entrepreneurs, right? Because there's some people who just can't handle the rejection. But it's really, that's how I look at it. I think it's also the personality that somebody has, and how you react to adversity / rejection. If you hear no enough times though, and you're not getting any yeses, I mean, there's probably something to that, right? As long as you have more yeses than no's, then you're good, right? If you have more no's than yeses, well, you don't want to like be naive. Like, no, this is the best thing ever, right? So you may want to listen to those eventually, but you don't want to listen to them too much if you're getting yeses as well. That's my opinion. It's pretty subjective, I think, but that's what I think.
Now, for fear of getting maybe a bit too personal, so to be clear to you guys, so Philipp's co-founder, Patrick, his brother, they're actually twins. So it's an interesting dynamic, I'm sure. So can you, maybe even with Patrick or with the team in general, was there ever moments where people didn't see eye to eye, and how did you have certain methodologies on how to deal with that?
Yeah, all the time.
Whether it was co-founder or with team, or how did you deal with that? Because I think for these guys who are going to be starting businesses, they may or may not have co-founders, and as I know, you don't always see eye to eye. So how do you mitigate that and deal with it?
Yeah, that happened like not every day, but a lot, and that's normal. Ideally, you have individuals on your team that complement your skill set. So I have a marketing, operations, product background. My brother has a sales and finance background. So our skill sets are very complementary. So I was like, no, I want to do sales. I can do it better than you, right? You can do sales. It's your thing. Go for it. So ideally, you surround yourself with complementary talent as much as you can. The other thing that I would say is yeah, that's a tough one, because that's like an HR. HR is a whole nother conversation. It's probably the most complicated one of all. In the end, you need to respect each other, and you're not going to hire the perfect leadership team from the beginning, right? It took us a while to get there, and some people, they just don't gel, and what happens? Well, they leave eventually, right? But if you can handle, like stress and, not agreeing and not seeing eye to eye all the time, As long as you are all working towards the same goal, then you're good. If you have people that are not working towards the same goal, then those difference of opinions probably can't be overcome. But if you're all working towards the same goal, usually, if you have mature individuals on the team, you can get over it. But not always the case. That's what makes it exciting.
Yeah.
And stressful.
Yeah, for sure. So switching gears a little bit, does anybody have any questions out of any of the stuff
Did you have
recently?
any chance to pitch for Dragon's Den or Shark Tank or something like that?
We didn't. Those are honestly, in my opinion, like PR. Those are just PR moves, right? We didn't really. We never applied. We never even really thought about it. Again, I think it's a pure PR move. Like, who knows what percentage of those deals actually get funded? I think it's pretty low.
I do. It's actually 89% don't go through.
Even though they say they did, right?
Yeah.
So really, it's a PR move, right? Like, you're on TV, you get the exposure, so it's great from a PR standpoint. That said, you are revealing sometimes some interesting information publicly. So it depends on the industry you're in, who your competitors are. So, and I think that those shows are kind of been out there for a while. So I think their popularity is maybe I'm wrong, but I used to like actually enjoy watching them, but now like
I think Shark Tank's still pretty popular, but Dragon's Den's lost a lot of audience, I think.
Yeah, like now if you say, "Oh, I've been on Dragon's Den," like, great. Like at the beginning when it was like, "Oh wow," like I think it's lost its novelty, right? I think there's other ways of getting PR.
I used to work in Shark Tank's team in Brazil, because before you enter in the stage, you have to evaluate your company, and they have like 20 people just to evaluate if it's true or not. But most of them, they want just PR, because they know
What to do?
yeah, and they want just to, it's like crowdfunding. You want to get traction, even if you're not going to be invested. It's fine.
It's a really interesting process, because I don't want to divert from your talk,
That's
but
okay.
On that subject is I've actually worked with clients that I've done pitch presentation coaching and preparation for Dragon's Den, and it's really interesting because I don't go into the sessions with them going like, we're going to work on this to get you the deal. Don't go into this expecting to get a deal. Let's do the best pitch possible that's going to get you the exposure that you want and the benefit you want out of it. And then maybe by chance you get a deal or something else comes your way. But yeah, it's been but the thing is I actually don't, I used to do it, I won't do them anymore, because everyone I did, we got all prepared, and then they went in and Dragon's Den was like, but here's actually how we want you to pitch, because you have to remember it's for entertainment, right?
Yeah.
So they're like, oh, well actually we want you to change it a little bit and do this and hold this when you're pitching. And I refuse to do it now. Anyways, it's a different thing. But relative and diverting the conversation a little bit, but still relative to that last question. So in the early days, obviously like you and Patrick, and as you're growing, everybody's kind of in charge of sales. But let's talk about marketing for a second.
Yep.
So, how did marketing look for you in the early days versus how it looks now? I'll say, for example, the thing that I was sort of saying to these guys, and something I'm going to teach in a future class, is about choosing your channels wisely, not trying to do everything at once. That's my way, but do you have any particular views on that, how you guys started out? Did you make a mistake of trying to do too much at once, or do you have any stories or knowledge that you'd like to share there?
Yeah, I think it's always important, if you can, to do experiment through different mediums or through different channels, right? And mitigate the investment up front, see what works, and then if you find one that works, scale it. Right? That's probably it sounds easy. It's not that easy, but that's something that I would aim to do. I think the way our marketing evolved is, it used to just be me doing it, and then we added team members and freelancers and all that. So really, it depends on what industry you're in. If you're in the B2C industry, it's very different than in B2B. And yeah, I think it's critical to just experiment with different
tactics, not the strategy, but the tactics, and seeing what works and really tracking it and seeing what makes sense from a cost acquisition standpoint. Because you could be spending so much money and you're getting nothing for it, right? So you have to use that data and realize that what's working and what's not.
And which media did you start to work, and which one did you decide to keep working? Actually.
Well, for us, for example, from a B2B standpoint, certain conferences are great, right? So, getting and sponsoring certain trade, print, and online sites makes sense. From a B2C standpoint, we don't really need to do any marketing because our property managers do it for us. But in terms of what specific strategies work with their tenants, it really depends on how they operate. So we give them a marketing toolkit, and they actually, and with our guidance, they help figure it out what works best. So we give them more than they need, and then they figure out what works best in their operations. Because not all property management companies work the same way, right? So there's some common processes, but there's not one that's identical each time. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but having tools, for example.
I can understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really each of these.
So in one of the classes so far, we talked briefly about things like CRMs and tracking your sales and things to potentially track and why you would track different channels and where referrals came from and stuff like that. Can you tell us, again, having the comparison of like back when you started versus nowadays, can you give us a view on the tools that you might have used and how you started at the beginning?
From a sales perspective?
Yeah.
So for sales, we went from using good old Excel to using Salesforce, which then was really expensive, so we switched to Zoho. Zoho has been great. It's way cheaper too. We use Zoho for our CRM. That's where it worked out really well. It was we were able to migrate all the data from Salesforce into Zoho.
Does everybody here remember what a CRM is? Yes. Everybody remember? Okay. So that said, what are some of the things you track on a regular basis?
So we have different stages. So we're tracking what stage the opportunity is in. You know, if it's closed, the probability of it closing, where the lead came from, all the different notes. Because if the salesperson leaves, so we can have the history of who we've talked to, and then we actually transfer those notes eventually. And there's still processes that can be improved there, but taking some of those notes and actually having the customer success team be able to access those files. So when the account gets handed over from sales to customer success, that transition's smooth and that they have all the information they need. But we're actually starting to build, I think, our own internal tools for that, for our onboarding. Yeah.
Cool. Any questions out of that? Because my next question is going to kind of...
I have a question.
Sure.
Do you have complete sort of a buy-in to using the CRM, or do you have trouble getting some employees to commit to the...
Yeah, there's always that. Well, not always.
How do you incentivize people to log things?
Especially with Zoho.
Yeah, well, pretty much your performance is judged on what's in Zoho. So if it's not in Zoho, it didn't happen. So from a sales perspective, pretty clear cut. Either you have leads or you don't. If they're not in Zoho and you have no leads, eventually you're going to lose your job. So there's that motivation.
It's just more of a fear motivator instead of a...
There's a fear, but it's really also, if everyone else is doing it, like, it becomes like ingrained. It's like, it's not in Zoho, well, it needs to be in Zoho. Because there's other stakeholders looking at it, and they'll come to you and be like, what's the status? Oh, it's this. Well, I didn't know that. So there's a fear, which we don't obviously like to do. But there's also everyone, like, if the team's growing, everyone else is on it, right? So if you're not putting your information in there, actually that doesn't reflect well on you. But yeah, there is always that challenge of people you gotta, right from training, right? That starts right from the get-go, from day one. This is how it's done. and having a really strong training manual for different departments that documents all your processes and doesn't leave anything to guess. Like, oh, I think I should use this. No, like this is your training manual. This is how it has to be done. Obviously, it'll evolve, so updating that appropriately too, so it doesn't become out of date and then it's not used.
Right.
Yeah. Good question.
Good.
We tried migrating out of Salesforce into Sugar, and everything got jumbled, and we got so frustrated we ended up going back to Salesforce. But you're right, it's really expensive. When you migrated from Salesforce to Zoho, was it a clean migration?
It was a clean migration, and Zoho provided great support. I didn't lead that project, but I heard that it went quite smoothly.
Okay.
I definitely don't miss Salesforce,
Yeah.
just because it's just so expensive.
So actually, I'm going to stay on the same subject for a moment, not necessarily on CRMs, but just out of curiosity, is there any, and maybe you're still using it today, but along the way, was there any tools or softwares that you, for lack of a better term, couldn't live without, or that, significantly changed your business, or, that maybe you're still using today that you could recommend, and maybe why? Like, for example, it might be like a project management tool. There's always a big question about, should I use Asana or Monday, or should I use, there's a lot of different options, obviously.
Yes, Slack became pretty key to us. We added a lot of, we built a lot of custom scripts and a lot of automated alerts into Slack. So from an operations standpoint, it became pretty important. That would be tough not having that right now. What other tools? Jira is key.
So have any of you guys ever been introduced to Jira? No. So this one, it's going to be relatively, like for Gasify, for example, and for Bike Cafe, it probably won't come into play. It's possible for Doug's project. So Jira is a development tracking tool, essentially. So it helps you track all your queue of things to do, what needs to be done yet, how much time it should take and how much time it did take. So it's a really useful tool in that regard. It's sort of a project management tool.
A tool that I've never used because I'm not a developer, but Sumo Logic is a tool that our development team absolutely lives by in terms of looking at errors in the database and all that. So Sumo Logic is another one. What else? There's been so many tools that we've used.
Any kind of marketing tools? Do you use Hootsuite, or do you use
Hootsuite. But just using the Facebook tools alone, Facebook just built so many tools that it just made sense to use their tools. Hootsuite still has a place, but I think Facebook has great tools just on their own. I have a whole bunch of them bookmarked. I just can't think of them right now. Google Alerts is really good. Just setting up Google Alerts for some terms, right? It can be really powerful.
What can you give an example of that? What would you use Google Alerts to track, particularly for you and your business?
Well, like anytime Rentmoola is mentioned, I want to know about it real time. I want to know if I'm mentioned. I want to. Those are the main ones. If there's certain conferences coming up, then actually I would use Hootsuite to set up certain hashtags to get kind of the conversations that are going on and seeing how we can kind of insert ourselves into those conversations naturally. I'm trying to think what else. MailChimp is a pretty good email marketing tool, but if you want to move to the enterprise solution, they have something called Mandrill. Mandrill's a really strong tool on the enterprise, more of the transactional email side, but that's a really strong tool. I would definitely recommend Mandrill. That proved to be a really good tool. Those are the kind of the ones that come to mind. There's actually Xero for accounting.
Mm-hmm.
Xero is a great tool, I think, out of New Zealand, but yeah, really strong tool. Those are kind of the ones that come to mind.
Cool.
From HR perspective, if you are going to certain sites, you're going to need an HR tool. There's lots out there like Bamboo HR, but we use a tool called Collage. Bringing that whole employee onboarding process online and letting them manage vacation requests and everything else in a portal is really good. We used to manage it in Excel, and it was just not scalable. So having an HR tool eventually is pretty key, like Collage, and they're very affordable.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I haven't actually heard of that one.
Yeah.
So I did want to, is there any questions on that kind of stuff at all? Because my next question is going to completely separate. So,
Okay.
although I also want to make sure you talk about everything you want to talk about.
Yeah, no, they've been great. Yeah, no, I'm good.
Okay, cool. So my next question is maybe a little bit less communications related, but something that's sometimes on the minds of some of us that as we're growing and moving on and building businesses.
Yeah.
So Philipp and his wife just had a baby about 6 weeks ago.
Baby number 2.
Baby number 2, to be clear. And so maybe you could just give us a bit of view on the either absence of or the existence of work-life balance.
Sure.
For you, and how that works with a growing company and team.
Yeah, it's definitely easier being an entrepreneur when you're younger and don't have kids, because then you don't feel guilty spending. I started Rentmoola before I had kids. I can't imagine starting Rentmoola when I have kids. I don't know if that would just be so tough, and for me personally. So I guess the trade-off is the older you are, the more experience you have. So you got to find that balance of experience. But if you are having a family, then it's pretty draining running a company, right? It's like having your own little baby, except it's not a kid. It's a company. So, as we matured, we were able to grow our team, right? So I wasn't doing customer service on weekends, right? Because there was 3 of us working, right? So I haven't touched customer service unless I want to reach out to a user and talk to them and get feedback. I don't talk to, I'm not on the front line, so we have a team for that. So it's really, there's a lot of it's a really personal decision, but for me, I can't imagine starting a new company with young kids. As they get older, their needs change too, so. I don't know.
So how do you manage that then? So what does that kind of look like?
I don't really work on weekends anymore unless I absolutely have to, and it sure makes you be even more efficient with your time, right? I would love to watch Netflix. I just don't have time. I've tried to find time, but I can't. So it's the most valuable thing you have. So it's really how you use time. So you just become even more efficient at it, because if you have your own business, the demand will be greater than if you don't. There's no doubt about it. So it's trying to find that balance.
So how do you, with a growing team, with where you're at now, and everything going on personally and work life, and how do you stay in touch with the different? I obviously delegation is kind of a key.
Yeah.
And letting teams do their thing.
Yeah.
And trusting, but how do you stay in touch with what is going on and making sure that things
so Slack's
the ship is staying.
So Slack's a good one, right? You can kind of go into channels and see what's going on, but not to comment, but just review, right? That's a really good one. Weekly management meetings are a good one, where you're getting updates from the different team leads. I think those are the biggest ones.
Is there anything particular you do in your meetings at all? There doesn't have to be an answer there, but some people have very interesting ways of running meetings that makes it really efficient, or an interesting twist. I used to use a gavel of doom.
Okay.
We called it God, and it was a big hammer thing.
I'm a big fan of half-an-hour meetings, not hour-long meetings. I find hour-long meetings, it's really tough to justify an hour-long meeting. If you can't do it in 30 minutes, then there's certain exceptions, but for the most part, you should be able to do it in half an hour. So our leadership meetings are usually half an hour. Sometimes they go over, but it's really coming a bit prepared. Ideally, you are prepared to going into a meeting. Right? You don't just show up. It doesn't mean it's a half an hour meeting. I don't have to do anything. Ideally, especially for certain meetings, you're preparing so you can go in there and everyone else has done the same. Otherwise, you're gonna feel like they're wasting your time.
Do you have an agenda for your meetings, for all your meetings?
Not all our meetings, but if it's a reoccurring meeting, it usually has an agenda, and we try to follow that each time. Obviously, the agenda may evolve
but we try and like follow like a kind of like some structure.
Do you use like EOS or do you use like for like sort of how you run your company? Do you use like the entrepreneurial operating system or the Rockefeller habits, or are you using any of those?
No, we are not. We are not that mature or that savvy.
So I want to put it out there. Is there any final questions?
I
Anything
want
you
to
want to
ask
ask?
you
Philip?
something. At the early stage, when you first started your company and started hiring people, well, you said you didn't get revenue until a year when it was started operating or something.
We got revenue right from the beginning, but just because of our business model. But it's really the how quickly you're growing that revenue and how quickly you can get to break even, right?
Okay, no, but the question was, if you had the problem of not having enough money to pay salaries, and how did you manage to communicate that to the people so they could be like still with your vision and don't stop working or don't reduce their efficiency on the quick?
So luckily we never had to do that, and that would be challenging to say the least, especially as you grow, right? Like if you're like, I didn't pay myself for like a while at the beginning, right? But that's different because I'm one of the founders. As soon as you start hiring people, the responsibility goes. Everything changes once you start having a payroll, right? Because now people are relying on you for their livelihood. That's why I say being an entrepreneur is exciting, but it's also a major responsibility, and it's something that I never take lightly, right? Like if you can't make payroll, then that person may have a family. There's like real life implications, right? So you ideally are not in that situation. I'm sure there's been countless situations. I mean, you read about them in the news, but luckily we never had to. We were never forced to. Yeah, we may have delayed payroll just because of like administrative reasons, and then you just say, oh, it's gonna be delayed by a day. But anything more than a day, and you're running into some pretty tough challenges, right? Just like renting a comfort on first, for example, can't wait a day. At least not usually.
Yeah, you can stretch some people, like suppliers, but it's not good to stretch your employees.
Yeah. Suppliers we stretch all the time, right? That's fine.
People you owe money to that don't work for you, you can drag out the payments, and you can even get payment plans from them. Like you can say, we can't afford to pay you, but if you give us a payment plan, we'll be around next year and next year and next year, and so they work with you. But your employees, if you don't have employees, you don't have a company. So employees have to get paid first.
I can say that I've had moments where like with BrickClick, there was one time particularly where I had closed an investor, and then he was like, yeah, I'll meet you on Friday to write the check, and then something happened and he couldn't make the meeting, and then we were he was the lead, so it was like we were almost out of cash. I didn't quite have enough to pay everyone, but it was very early in the early days, and we only had 2 employees, so it was like I just had to sit down with them, and luckily both of them are single guys, so it was like, in my case, I was just able to sit down with them and say, look, I'm going to be a few days, I'm pulling it together, I'm talking to our original main investor, and worst comes to worst, he'll put the money in and I'll just repay him. And they were like, okay, it's one of those things of setting expectations at the very beginning. I told them from the very beginning, look, we're a startup, anything can happen, but I'm always going to do my best to mitigate it and do my, everything I can. But I can say with certainty, as we grew, or as my agency grew, for example, as soon as you have any set of employees, you can't really play that game anymore. And agency life was especially hard because sometimes you have weird pay cycles with clients, right? Yeah. So that was a really weird one to manage. But that's why we eventually got a CFO or a controller. She took care of it. I didn't have to think about it anymore. Yeah, so cool. Any questions, Sarah? Do you have anything to
How can your customers communicate with you just in case they have something they don't like about the platform?
Yeah, we give them lots of ways to communicate with us. Number one, email. They can phone us. Chat, live chat's a big one. And social, actually,
I think because we're dealing with money isn't that big for us from a customer service standpoint. And we actually recently introduced text message, so you can text us. And that's another tool that we couldn't live without is Zendesk. Zendesk runs our customer service. Yeah, Zendesk is.
That's still better Canadian. I went to the office.
Yeah.
I thought Zendesk is in San.
It is in San
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, just
Yeah.
in this little valley.
Yeah. Anyway, Zendesk is it powers our customer service. Can't imagine not having it. We didn't have it at the beginning, but we actually got it pretty early on and just kept building
So
on
maybe
it.
you can explain what it is, because until I went there, I didn't really get what it
Yeah,
was.
really, Zendesk is a tool that allows you to manage all your different channels. So really, it's your customer service tool. So it's allowing you to manage all the like inbound inquiries that really get turned into tickets, right? And then you can work on resolving those tickets and moving them through the queue.
And who you can see who's responsible for what. You can reassign.
Exactly.
Like, okay, so Sarah's going to take care of this one. I'll assign this one to
Doesn't it
Andres.
collect from all channels?
Yeah. So
it
yeah.
it consolidates all of them into one.
So yeah, Zendesk. So we have chat coming through Zendesk. We have text coming through Zendesk. All of our customer service emails go through that. Social and phone, even phone because so we can do stuff remotely too. So the whole system runs. Every single channel is running through Zendesk. Great question.
Yeah, there's several examples of those. There's other companies like Groove.
There's others.
There's a whole bunch of different ones. It's one of those things. You just like CRMs and just like project management tools. A lot of times you sort of have to try them out and see what works for you and what fits for you, and your processes and your workflows and your teams and
Which
how they
live chat do you
communicate.
guys use?
We use the Zendesk live chat. Yeah. We used to use another tool, but we just wanted to be integrated, so we just cut it out.
And they offer that, so, yeah.
Yeah, I find for customer service, ideally, you have just one tool for all the channels, just easier from our experience. Yeah.
Did you have anything else you want to say, or is there any other questions?
Yes, just personal curiosity about my background experience as well. How often do you get the internal communication to align the results or show the results about your company, internal and external, with the investors?
So investors would be quarterly, and with team, like with our employees, it's monthly. Yeah.
The same as mine. Perfect. Thank you.
Cool. So I'm gonna.
What was the HR tool you mentioned?
So we use
Collage.
Collage, but
Collage, that was it. I knew it.
Collage, but there's Humi and there's Bamboo HR.
Rise
Isn't-
Rise is another one, I think.
Oh, Rise, we were using Rise.
Yeah, Rise is a local company.
Right.
Are you bringing up that?
Yeah. Well, assuming you want me to still.
It's up to you. You can talk about it later if you want.
You're the guest speaker. It's
I
up to
know.
you.
I know. I'm just.
What I thought is that I would pull it up and you could just quickly, briefly talk about why you thought that email was so powerful, and then I
Sure.
will share it with them.
Sure.
Or that link, I mean.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'll share it with them on Slack.
Sure.
So maybe you can just tell them why you thought it was so
Sure.
powerful and important. So for some reason, why do I not have a picture?
Is your computer on?
Yes, it's
Sometimes if the computer isn't.
No, it is, yeah.
Okay. I don't hear a sound. Oh, but it's on. It's light.
So,
It's weird. Is it on your screen?
Yeah?
So maybe you just have to choose screen, right? Shift screen.
No, it's showing that it's,
Gone to the projector.
yeah. That is weird.
I think it's working.
The projector's on. I can see the light is on. It's showing that it's pushing it to the projector.
And the projector has the correct source. Try it.
That's a good question.
Yeah, it might be looking together.
Except for I don't know what button that is.
Let me try and guess.
Haha.
There you go.
I just pressed the info button.
Oh. So there you go. No, you should have been like, oh, this, it only goes down so far. Yeah. Okay, so, yeah, so Philipp sent this to me, I think it was last night, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought it was a pretty cool article and some notes. And he sent it to me and just said, like, look, this is a super important email, I think, and article. But tell us more.
Yeah, so I try and read a lot because everything is evolving so quickly. So actually, I tweet everything I read. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll see what I'm reading. Anyhow, so this is one article I tweeted recently, but I actually wrote like must read in the tweet because I thought it was that good. Can't remember. This is written by a guy who actually I mentioned in my tweet, and he actually followed me back. And he's a pretty like influential guy. He does the EO like seminars at MIT. Anyways, so
What's his name?
can't remember his name right now. If you click on the article though, where is his name? It's at the top there. I think Sasha something. You scroll to the very top. Sasha Strauss. Yeah.
Where do you even
this
see
guy's super smart. Anyways,
It's gonna close that ad thing.
sometimes you come across articles that like really. Actually, this was in a podcast form as well. But sometimes you come across articles that like really resonate, and this one was simple and resonated. So it just talks about how you should be communicating in today's world. So I won't read all this verbatim. I'll just read the first sentence. So assume nothing, right? So don't assume anything about your audience. You need to empathize with them. So for us, right, we were empathizing with the tenant that they didn't want to write rent checks, property managers because they want to save time and do other things, right? So you got to empathize and understand what their pain point is. You got to be an advocate. So you got to like let them know that you have something for them, but there's ways of doing that in a strategic way. Building relationships, curating, right? So nowadays people are overwhelmed. There's so much content. You can't just tell everyone every single thing you do, right? You got to find the ones that are most relevant and go up with those ones first, right? So really you're curating. You're doing the work for them because they don't want to read like a page of stuff. They ideally have video or like bullet points. Bullet points are always a winner. Teach, don't sell. I thought that was a really powerful one, right? Like, again, you're educating them, and by educating them, they're naturally going to see, hey, they understand my problem, they have a solution, they're teaching me. Think about, like, and I thought this was a really strong analogy. You get people being so proud of the school they went to, right? Because they were taught, like, that's where they learned, and then you become a big advocate for for the school, for the people that teach you, right? You're like, that guy taught me, I love him. You're not gonna be like, yeah, that guy sold to me, I love him. No one's gonna say that, right? So, like, I'm proud where I went to university, where I went to or where I went to high school, because they taught me that, right? So that's why I thought that worked really well. Teach, don't sell. Care. So nowadays, you gotta like legitimately show that you care. So for example, why are you donating money to a charity? Like, you gotta find a way that actually makes it credible, right? So he has some examples. Because people nowadays do care about, I guess, what's that word? There's that term. You got to be conscious. Sustainable. Socially responsible. That's it. But you got to be. But now everyone's socially responsible, right?
Yeah.
Or they say they are.
Well, they're doing it to just check the box.
Exactly, right? So you can't just do it to check the box. You got to do it in a meaningful authentic way, where people can be like, oh, that's really neat, right? So he actually shows he goes through some examples that are really good. I think that was the last point. I think, yeah, because he says, yeah, you don't want people to think that you're a capitalist pig, which I thought was a pretty funny term. Right. Anyways, so really good. I would bookmark this, review it, and just keep it in the back of your mind as you're doing anything with your company and particularly from a marketing/communication standpoint. I think that's a winner. So that's all I have.
Awesome.
And if the only thing that you can take away from this session is that article, then perfect. I'm happy with that.
I'm hoping they'll have taken away a lot.
Hopefully more than that, but
yeah,
that article is definitely worth reading.
So, well, that was amazing. Thank you, Philip.
You're welcome.
Yeah.